In the heat of battle, with all that adrenaline coursing through your veins, it can be difficult to keep your eyes on the matter at hand, easy to get caught up in your own excitement. And for these 10 fighters, they may well have just let loose with their celebrations a little too early. Some got their timing wrong, others thought too much of their performance. These are 10 UFC fighters who celebrated too early. Number 10. Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley might rub a lot of you the wrong way, but when it comes to his striking skills, there's little doubt that he's one of the best in the bantamweight division. And a few fighters had a chance to experience that, quite like Thomas Almeida. Now in the past, Almeida has definitely had his fair share of issues with durability in his chin, but even with the hard hands of O'Malley in front of him, the Brazilian managed to outdo himself, showing improved toughness, so much so that Sugar Sean was forced to finish the fight more than once. After attempting to score a walk-off KO, O'Malley was directed back to the action by the referee. But what's crazy here is it actually happened twice. And just as O'Malley tried for a walk-off KO again, he was told to finish the fight. And boy did he take that advice, swinging down on Almeida with a powerful looping shot that was enough to earn Sugar Sean the biggest win of his career to date and a spot in the 135-pound top 15. Number 9. Johnny Hendricks. It's hard not to feel for Johnny Hendricks. Not only did he push perhaps the greatest fighter of all time to the very brink, only to lose on a set of controversial scorecards, but it was also a 5-round UFC title fight, a dream that only becomes a reality for a select few. But after battering Georges St-Pierre around the octagon in what was still a competitive fight, Hendricks had the look of a man who had just done enough to make a career's worth of work pay off. Body language often speaks volumes, and as Bruce Buffer prepared to read out the judges' scorecards, as GSP looked nervous, Hendricks stood like he was just seconds away from earning UFC gold. Unfortunately for him, it didn't quite pan out like that, and St-Pierre was awarded the decision victory before promptly retiring on the spot. A tough break for Big Rig, that's for sure. Number 8. Zulazinho. Sometimes the relief that comes about from a victory can be so great that a fighter just collapses under the weight of what had just happened. So if you do plan on letting all that energy out, it may be wise to be 100% sure that you have in fact pulled off the win. And for Zulazinho, the former Pride star who weighed a whopping 350 pounds, a late flurry against Yusuf Shaiv at the end of a round saw him convinced that he had managed to score the TKO. The joy on his face was clear as he slumped his gigantic frame down to the canvas, exhausted but elated by his victory, except he hadn't actually won the fight. He'd only witnessed the end of the round, and to make matters even worse, Zulazinho didn't even go on to win the fight, with his standout moment proving to be the case of a mistaken fight result. The official scoring rules it as a decision defeat. Tough break, eh? Number 7. Chris Cyborg. Being TKO'd by Chris Cyborg is bad, but having it happen twice is just another level of cruel. And realistically, the referee should have stepped in and saved Shayna Baszler the unnecessary punishment. At the time, neither woman had found their way into the UFC, but between the two, it was already clear that Cyborg had the much higher ceiling. And as expected, the Brazilian battering ram proceeded to put a one-sided beating on her opponent, eventually dropping her to the mat and following up with strikes that should have forced referee intervention. But by the time came, it was only to remind Cyborg that the fight wasn't over. At this point, Justinho had already walked away, believing her job to be done. When the second assault came, however, there was little doubt left over its legitimacy. A brutal and perhaps even needless end to a dominant effort. Number 6. Marina Rodriguez. As one of the most exciting rising contenders in women's MMA today, Marina Rodriguez has climbed her way to the number 3 spot at 115 pounds on the back of a 4-fight win streak over some of the best strawweights the UFC has to offer. Her first victory on that run came against Amanda Ribas, a very good fighter in her own right, but a fighter who was forced to really take more damage than necessary after some questionable refereeing from Herb Dean. After surviving an early threat in the grappling department, Rodriguez blasted Ribas with a hard shot, and it really did seem like Herb Dean was climbing between the two to bring the fight to a halt. Except he wasn't, and after making this clear to Rodriguez, she was forced to end her early celebration and resume her brutal beatdown of the clearly dazed Ribas. In the end, it didn't take much longer for the fight to reach its natural conclusion, leaving Marina Rodriguez as the fight's rightful winner and Amanda Ribas with 2 TKO losses for the price of 1. Remember, if you're enjoying our content and want to see more, be sure to leave a like before subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Number 5. Anderson Silva. Fans of Anderson Silva will vividly remember the moment it appeared as though this once great middleweight champion had finally secured a much-needed victory. With Michael Bisping standing in front of him, Silva had found his way through a competitive 3 rounds with a count before something truly strange happened. At the close of round 4, Bisping, after losing his mouthpiece, for some strange reason decided to motion to the ref to pause the action. Who knows why he did this, but once the Spider noticed that his opponent's attention was split between the ref and the fight, he took the opening and capitalized on it, blasting Bisping with a picture-perfect flying knee, sending the future champ to the canvas before jumping onto the side of the octagon to celebrate. Unfortunately, this was yet another case of a fight not being officially finished, and Silva was forced to prematurely end his mid-fight celebrations and return to the cage. And against all odds, Michael Bisping somehow rallied and stole the next round. and later the entire fight on the judges' scorecards. A truly special night for British MMA. Number 4. Joe Harding. Is it fair to call reckless mid-fight showboating a form of celebrating? We think so. And few fighters, if any, have managed to make themselves look quite as silly as Joe Harding. This rangy and stylish striker was so confident that he was better than his adversary that he proceeded to clown him at every opportunity, looking like a professional dancer more than a professional fighter at the worst of his times. And for the most part, his confidence was well placed. Johan Segas, his opponent, really didn't have an answer for his odd, herky-jerky style. Or at least he didn't until he managed to catch him with a clean head kick at the opening of the 3rd round. The lesson? Don't count your chickens before they've hatched, and when it comes to fighting inside the cage, don't make light of what is a truly dangerous situation. Number 3. Cynthia Calvillo. It's not only mid-fight celebrations that deserve their mention here, and for Cynthia, her ascent through the ranks of the UFC strawweight division saw many peg her as a potential champion in the future, with Dana White in particular citing her as a truly generational talent. The problem here was that she was given an almighty step up in competition in the form of the first ever 115-pound champion Carla Esparza just 3 fights in. The 3-round battle was indeed closely contested, but by the time the action was through, you did get the sense that the decision could go either way. So when Calvillo pretty much started celebrating before the scores had even been read, it came off as a little overconfident. And sure enough, none of the 3 judges saw the fight in her favor, leaving her with her first career defeat as a professional. Number 2. Rousimar Palhares. Rousimar Palhares might be the single most unpopular fighter in MMA history, or at least the dirtiest fighter. Known to most as the world's most dangerous leg locker, not in terms of his talent for the technique, although they're certainly good, but mainly because Palhares has a major reputation for not letting go of the submission, even after the tap. On several occasions, as the referee has tried to break his grip, it has taken some real effort to pry this Brazilian off of his opponent's limb. But for this list, he gets his inclusion for very different reasons. Taking on Dan Miller under the UFC banner, Palhares was in cruise control, using his power advantage to work towards a finish with some heavy ground and pound. When the job appeared to be done, he wheeled off in celebration, sitting atop the octagon in pure joy. The only problem was that the fight was not over yet, and in a truly awkward exchange, the ref had to call on Rousimar to come down off the cage and resume the fight. What made this one ugly is that Palhares was able to score the TKO shortly after, proving that the fight should have been stopped. Number 1. Jon Jones. Now this one was just plain disrespectful, and that was a general trend during the build-up between the first meeting between Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier. Both these guys could not stand each other, and they seemed absolutely determined to do everything in their power to annoy the other. Whether it was their famous off-air exchange where Jones told DC he would actually kill him if he ever spat on his face, or who could forget the time that they took down an entire stage setup through a brawl that was sparked by DC getting too close for comfort. But when the fight night came around, the resulting battle was far more one-sided than most anticipated. Jones pretty much had his way with Cormier from the opening bell to the last, dominating wherever the fight took place to mark yet another defense of his 205-pound crown. But in those final seconds of the 5th round, Jones decided to take one more dig at DC by celebrating prematurely, with time still left on the clock. Cormier, who assumed the fight was over, proceeded to drop his hands and wheel away in defeat. And in that moment, Jon spun around and fired off one final pair of shots to his opponent's face. A dirty move? Absolutely. But more of what we've come to expect from this legendary MMA rivalry. And that will just about do it for this video. Again, if you enjoyed today's video and want to see more, be sure to leave a like before subscribing to the channel so you can stay up to date with all of our latest uploads. Thanks for watching.